Welcome, everyone. Shivim Panim, 70 Faces. We're doing 2 chapters tonight. For those who have the book, chapters 57 and 58. This is a discussion of square numbers and multiplying numbers. If you remember, we're on the last section of the book, 21 different methodologies that have to do with numbers. And tonight we're doing 2 of them. As I mentioned before, many people, when you mention numbers, think of gematria, the numerical values of the letters, and don't realize that here we're presenting 21 different methodologies that have to do with numbers in relationship to words and verses and passages and entire books, the significance of different numbers. So tonight we are doing square numbers, and this is mentioned going all the ways back, but there's no doubt that Rabbi Ginsburg has brought the whole idea of squaring numbers and multiplying numbers, the 2 chapters that we're learning tonight, to completely different level, where he's able to reveal deep and profound inner dimensions of the Torah by showing square numbers and multiplying numbers. So tonight we'll start on the first verse of the Torah. Bereshit bara Elokim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. When we try to analyze we'll call it a philosophical question, why did God create the world? So we don't have a definitive answer, but we have, we'll call it traditional answers that have been given over the ages as to why God created the world. One of them is that part of the essence of God is the desire to do good, to bestow chesed on there was no creation at that point, and that was, in a sense, the problem. Because if someone wants to give love and there's no one to receive it, in a sense, it could be, in our terms, it could be very frustrating. If we want to give love to someone and either we don't feel it coming back, or we can't figure out who to reach out to and share our love. So again, we're talking in human terms, no doubt. But Sarah's reminding me, anytime we mention Rav Ginsburg, we should all pray for a refuah shlema for Rav Yitzchak Feivish ben Brina Malka. Yes, he needs a refuah shlema. Everyone should try to remember that. Sarah, if you could write it out for everyone. We've done it a number of times, but it's worth doing again. Yitzchak Feivish ben Brina Malka. So where do we see this in the first verse of the Torah? So if you take the second and third word, not in the beginning, but God created, bara Elokim. Bara Elokim in gematria equals 289, which is 17 squared. And 17 is the word tov, good. And so here we see already in the first verse, this idea of God created for the purpose of, with the agency of chesed, of love. And we see this actually every day of creation, that almost every day of creation, it says that God looked at a certain creation and saw that it was good. This is repeated over and over in the 7 days of creation. So the first one is when God created light. It says, V'yomer Elokim yihi or v'yi or. And then God saw the light and it was good. So here we have, again, bara Elokim, God created equals 289, which equals 17 squared. But there's even more in the first verse, that it's one of the most hidden names of God. It never appears in the Torah explicitly. It's given over in Kabbalah that this is a name of God, and it's an Aleph and Hey and Vav and Hey. This is considered one of the names of God. And it, along with the four-letter name of God, is the same letters, almost, as with the Aleph, which is a future tense, of coming into being. Aleph and Hey and Vav and Hey. So where do we see this in the first sentence? The Rashi Tevot, the acronym of Et HaShamayim Ve'et HaOretz. Et is the Aleph, HaShamayim is the Hey, the Et HaOretz, the Vav and the Hey. Aleph, Hey, Vav, and Hey. And that spells out this name of God, and those four letters equals Tov, equals good. So this is the name of good, and according to Hasidic tradition, this was the name that the Baal Shem Tov was a master of. The Baal Shem Tov literally means the master of the good name. Well, good is Tov. And what name are they talking about? This name. And what's the power of this name? To connect heaven and earth. Just like it says, Et HaShamayim ve'et HaOretz. The heavens and the earth. This is the power to connect spirituality to physicality, soul to body, energy to matter. I see in the chat someone wrote it out in the Hebrew and the numbers, so people can look at it. It might be clear if you can see it. So this is two incredible allusions in the first verse of the Torah, this idea of the essential goodness of God. And one, it's not the only, but one of the reasons given for God creating the world in the first place. And there's one other thing here. This is also a Torah from Rav Ginsburg, an amazing one, is because we also see the word Tov in Eitz Hadat, Tov V'Ra, the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And we're told that what happened when they ate from the tree on a practical level? Well, many things happened, but one of the things is until then, as it were, good and evil were easily identified, put it that way. It was more objective. By eating from the tree, they took objective reality and it turned into subjective reality. And so therefore, every good, in a sense, has the seed of a possible negative development that could come out of it. And every evil has in potential some good that could come out of it, even though the initial experience of it might be negative or bad or evil, but there will be a seed. So Tov V'Ra got mixed up. So it's interesting that this number 289, which is Bara Elokim, is the phrase Tov Bara, Ra B'Tov. Evil in good, good in evil. When you add those phrases up, it equals 289, which is 17 squared. Ultimately, everything is coming from the goodness of God. So here we see three incredible allusions in the first verse of the Torah about the goodness of Hashem and the goodness that is planted, is engraved in all of creation. The next one we'll do is on page 554. And this is relating to Avram Avinu, that the first time that God speaks to Avram Avinu, to Abraham, is when he says, go from your land and your father's house and your birthplace to the land that I will show you. That's the first explicit directive or time that God speaks to Abraham as recorded in the Torah. So Lech Lecha, as we know, is actually spelled the same way. Lech Lecha, Lamed Chaf Sofit. And it's translated literally as go to yourself. Lech Lecha, go to yourself. Again, it's been posted on the chat so everyone could see it. Well, those two phrases equal 100. Lech is 50 and Lecha is 50. This is 100. Avram gives birth to Yitzchak. Well, actually, Sarah gave birth, but Avram is part of it when he was 100 years old. So these two things are very, very connected. The fact that Avram is 100 years old, meaning when it says, go to yourself. So from this, we could learn that the ultimate going to yourself is actually bringing children into the world. That our children is a reflection of our ultimate lecha, you. That's the ultimate manifestation of our inner journey. Now, what does this have to do with square numbers? So we also have by tradition that Avram passed 10 tests. And of course, if you square 10, you get 100. And so these two things are intimately and essentially connected. The idea that Avram was able to go to himself. Well, how did he accomplish that? By passing these 10 tests. And so again, 10 squared equals 100. And the test is what's bringing out who Avram is, Avram's full potential. And that's what a square number means. It's like the full manifestation of any particular number is its square. But there's one other thing that's also connected to 10, which is connected to Avram, is Avram is promised 10 lands as an inheritance. And this is also the same thing is when Avram or the children of Avram manifest their full potential, then in the Messianic era, we will merit to inherit 10 lands. Now we've merited 7 lands. And there are 3 lands, the Cani, the Kenizi, and the Kadmoni. This is in the book of Genesis. It even names them specifically. So here again, 10 squared, the ultimate of Avram fulfilling the Lech Lecha, go to the land that I will show you. Well, this land ultimately is symbolized by inheriting 10 inheritances, 10 lands. So here we see the numbers 10 and 100 connected in the life of Avram. And of course, 100 is 10 squared. Now, the next one is brought down from, it's a tradition from literally thousands of years ago, is that the name Ekia Asher Ekia, I will be that which I will be. This is the name that God revealed to Moshe at the burning bush. And it only appears, actually, Ekia Asher Ekia only appears one time in the entire Bible, the entire Tanakh, though the name Ekia appears 2 other times in the same verse. In the same verse, the name Eki appears 3 times. But in this special name called Ekia Asher Ekia, I will be that I shall be. So Ekia equals 21. And so it's brought down, this is like an ancient tradition, because the word appears twice. So 21 squared equals 441 equals emet, equals truth. And the sages say that the seal, that God's seal is truth. And this is connected to these 2 names. 21 squared equals 441 equals emet. And where did they learn this thing that God's seal is truth? The last 3 words of creation, of the Shabbat of Bereshit, bara Elokim la'asot. The last letters of those 3 words, bara is an aleph, Elokim is a mem, la'asot is a taf. Thank you again. I think this is Ephraim who is writing out these things in Hebrew. These are very, very helpful. So everyone, if you're looking at your chats, you can see exactly what I'm talking about in the Hebrew. So those 3 letters spell emet, spell truth. And that's the end of creation. So God's seal is truth, but it's already hinted to in this name, Eki Asher Ekia equals 441, which is 21 squared. Now this is, like I said, many of the things that we're discussing are different Torahs that I learned from Rav Ginsburg. They're not all his. Some of them are brought down by other Hasidic masters. And some of them go all the way back to the Zohar. Okay, so the next one is maybe in a sense, the most practical one of them all, is that Sfirat Omer, the period between Pesach and Shavuos, is 7 weeks, and each week has 7 days. And in fact, when we count the Omer, we count the days and the weeks. And so here, 7 times 7, 7 squared equals 49. These are the days of the Omer, the 49 days of the Omer. So this is not like a fancy one, but this is the one that we spend almost 2 months executing and paying attention to. Is a simple cycle of 7 times 7, and we have it again in the sabbatical years. We work the land for 6 years, and then we rest on the 7th year. This year, of course, is a sabbatical year, a Shemitah year. But then there's this a bigger count of counting 7 times 7 sabbatical years. And then the 50th year is the Jubilee year, the Yovel year. So here we see in time, the idea of squaring numbers, the number 7, is extremely significant, very significant. Now the next one is on page 557. And here we're going to cube a number. If you take the Shema and the 3 passages that we say with the Shema, now you're going to see now that we are going to do a number with, including the Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed, that we say after the Shema. After Hear, O Israel, God our God, God is one. We say, blessed is the name of the glory of God forever and ever. But if you don't count that, because that is not in the Torah. The Shema is in the Torah, Hear, O Israel, and the 3 passages are in the Torah. So when we don't count Baruch Shem, it comes to exactly 1,000 letters. Now, of course, 1,000 is 10 times 10 times 10. And we know how important the number 10, we talked about it just connected to Avram Avinu. But the number 10 in mathematics in general, the whole decimal system, but we know how many things in Jewish tradition have 10, the 10 expressions with which God created the world, the 10 plagues, the 10 commandments, the 10 sfirot. And here, the Shema, which is such a central part of our morning and evening prayers, have exactly 1,000 letters. And there's also a tradition about the 1,000 that we're told that when Moshe received the Torah in Sinai, he received 1,000 lights. Now, this is a symbolic idea, but Moshe, we're told that the first tablets were written with the finger of God, however we understand that, and that it was on a much higher level than the second tablets. And the symbol of receiving the Torah, which is called Torah Or, the light of Torah, is symbolized in what's called the 1,000 lights. And so this is symbolically connected to the 1,000 letters of the Shema, because the Shema is the central fundamental statement of faith in Judaism. And so here it's 10 times 10 times 10, really 10 cubed. Now, what happens if you add Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed, the verse that is not in the Torah, but the sages added, and we're not going to go into another many reasons and sources of why we say Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed. But if you add that, so the total letters will be, one second, of course, 1,024. There are 24 letters in Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed. So together it's 1,024. So what's the significance of that? 1,024 is the square of 32. In other words, 32 squared equals 1,024. What's the significance of that? Is that 32 equals the word lev, heart. And so when we say the Shema, the first passage afterwards starts with, and you shall love God your God with all your heart. And so the whole, we're told that all of prayer, remember in the morning and the evening service, Shema is like right in the middle. It's in a sense, the central focus, even though the main, it's not considered a prayer per se. The Amida, what's called the silent prayer, the standing prayer, that is the quintessential prayer in Judaism. Shema is part of the prayer service, but it's more of a statement. But this statement is wrapped up with the idea of loving God with our whole heart. In other words, when we say the Shema, it's not just an intellectual exercise. It needs to be done with our whole heart and soul. So that's very significant that you take the whole Shema and it's 32 squared. That's what we're talking about here, square numbers, what we can learn from square numbers. And we also have learned that the last letter in the Torah is a Lamed, and the first letter in the Torah is a Bet. So on Simchas Torah, when we end the Torah and then we immediately begin, so we're connecting the Lamed to the Bet, and that's heart. And in a sense, that's the heart of the whole Torah, is to be what we call a mensch, a good person, a good person. If you remember, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai had 5 main students, and he asked them, what is the best way, the most important way to be in the world? What attitude is the best way to deal with the world, to experience the world and have other people experience you? So Rabbi Elazar ben Arach said, Lev Tov, a good heart. And each one of them gave a different answer. Each one is correct in its own perspective. But after they all gave their opinions, so Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said, I choose Lev Tov because that includes everything. So here, this is the significance of the whole Shema and the 3 passages with Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Le'olam equaling Lev squared, 32 squared, the ultimate manifestation of a good heart. Now we'll end with one that we might have mentioned for those who come to the Tuesday night class. If you remember, we did a whole series on the Shekhinah, on God's presence in the world, what's called the Shekhinah, the indwelling presence. So the gematria of Shekhinah is 385. And one way to get to 385, here's a beautiful manifestation of the number 10 that we were just talking about. If you multiply each number between 1 and 10, meaning 1 times 1 plus 2 times 2 plus 3 times 3, etc. You multiply each number leading to 10, it equals Shekhinah, 385. So here, this is a Kabbalistic revelation, but it's really telling us the importance of the number 10, that God's indwelling presence is manifest through the 10 Sfirot, and that the Shekhinah, the indwelling presence, is the full manifestation. The squaring a number is like its full potential. So here we're squaring 1 times 1, 2 times 2, 3 times 3, etc. So that equals Shekhinah. Okay, now we're going to the next chapter, which is multiplying numbers. Now this is different than squaring numbers. Here we're taking 2 numbers and we're multiplying them, but we're not doing what's called stam. We're going to see great significance in doing this. Now, probably the most ancient one, it appears in the Tikkunei Zohar. And here it's a combination of, again, squaring number. We just square to get the Shekhinah is 1 times 1, 2 times 2, 3 times 3. For those who want to look, it's on page 564, along with the mathematics written out here. And here in the Tikkunei Zohar, which has a tradition from even way before it. So it gives over this hidden secret of the name of God, the 4-letter name of God, Yud and Hey and Vav and Hey. So the numerical values is Yud is 10, Hey is 5, Vav is 6, and Hey is 5. In fact, I'm going to hold this up, and hopefully everyone will be able to see it while I'm saying this. So if you take each of the 4 letters and you multiply them by themselves, in other words, Yud times Yud, Hey times Hey, Vav times Vav, and Hey times Hey. So you have Yud equals 10, so 10 times 10 equals 100. Hey equals 5. 5 times 5 is 25. Vav is 6. 6 times 6 is 36. And Hey is 5 times 5 equals 25. Altogether equals 186, equals the word for makom, for space. Makom. Now, this is one of the secrets, that one of the ways that we refer to God is by using the name Makom. So this is the secret of where did they come up with this idea that we should refer to God as place. And here we see it, and again, this goes back to the Tikkun Zohar. So here we see that this is an ancient tradition, an ancient method of seeing the inner dimensions of the Torah. And this is connected to when Moshe pleads for forgiveness for the Jewish people after the golden calf. And God reveals the 13 attributes of compassion. So I'm just going to answer Sharon very quickly. Place. Makom means place. But obviously it's connected to space. It's connected to space. But literally makom means a place. So before God reveals the 13 midot rachamim, the 13 attributes of compassion, so God says, you cannot see my face and live, but you can see, as it were, my behind. And then it says that God hid him in a cleft of the rock, and says, behold, there is a place with me. And Rashi says, what does it mean there's a place with me? Rashi explains, who, meaning, I'll say it in Hebrew, who hamakom shela olam, v'ha'olam eino mekomo. He, meaning God, is the place of the world, is the space of the world, but the world is not his space. This is what's called a paradoxical statement. In other words, God is present in every point of space, but God is in no space. God is above time and space. And they're both true simultaneously. God is above time and space, and God is within all of time and space. So this is one of the sources, this is the Tikkun Zohar was basing it when in the Torah it says, there is a place with me. And so this is where we get the tradition to refer on occasion to God as makom, especially when you're comforting mourners. We say, hamakom yenachem etchem b'tov sharei Sion v'Yerushalayim. The makom, God. And one of the answers is, why do we use that reference to God? Is because sometimes when we lose someone very close to us and we're truly mourning, it's as if we don't know where our place in the world is. Like, this person has been taken away from us, and it's like we're so used to, in a sense, sharing space with this person. You could be separated by 8,000 miles, but let's say child and parent is like, you're sharing the same genetics, the same genetic material. You're always connected. And so, chas v'shalom, God forbid, we lose someone close to us. It's like we feel like, where is our place now? So that's why we say, hamakom yenachem etchem. God will give you back your place. And he'll give you back your place. So I'm just so happy people are sharing in the chats all of the sources here. That's fantastic. It's just really wonderful. Keep going. Okay. The next one we're going to do is on page 562. And this has to do with the daughters of Salofchad. If you remember, just a few parshas ago, the 5 daughters of Salofchad come to Moshe Rabbeinu, come to Moses and say, our father had no sons, and from what you have given over so far, only sons inherit. Why shouldn't we inherit? And God said, I'll take your mishpatan. He took their judgment, their question to God, and God said they spoke correctly. That daughters also have the right to inheritance. So here we're going to talk about multiplying numbers, because the Torah specifies that there were 5 daughters of Salofchad, and they even named them. All 5 daughters are named, and then their request is called their judgment. And if you remember, we discussed this a few times in this class, just a few weeks ago. The nun of mishpatan is big. It's a large nun rabati. And nun equals 50. So here we have the number 10 again. The 5 daughters times 10 equals 50. That's the significance of this big letter nun. Now, nun equals 50, and we're told, our sages tell us, and we're told in Kabbalah, in the Gemara, that there is what's called 50 gates of understanding. Chamishim Sharei Bina. 50 gates of understanding. And the sages come and say, Bina Yetera Nitna Leisha Yoter Meish. More, an extra portion of understanding was given to women more than men. Because Bina is considered a feminine energy, a feminine sphera. And so here we see the 5 daughters of Tzlofchad. Again, through this whole evening, this number 10 has come up over and over again as one of the secrets of understanding deeper dimensions in the Torah. When you multiply or square by 10. So here, the 5 daughters times 10 equals 50, equals the gates of understanding, and equals this large nun of mishpatan. Another one on page 563 that I learned from Rav Ginsburg. I'm not sure if he's the ultimate source of this or he saw it someplace else, but it brings a very, very important one, again, by multiplying times 10, that it says in the Gemara, one of the worst personality traits is pride, ga'ava. And in fact, there's a statement in the Gemara in the Gemara that the sages, as it were, quote God saying, someone with ga'ava, he and I cannot exist in the world at the same time. In other words, someone who is full of themselves, then there's no place for God. There's no makom. There's no place for God. So the word ga'ava, which is written Gimel Aleph Vav Hey, equals 15. If you multiply 15 times 10, you get 150. And that's the word in Hebrew for anger, ka'as. Chaf ayin samach equals 150. And so here, these two are essentially connected. When someone has a lot of pride, it's inevitable that this person is going to feel that people are stepping on their toes, are invading their space, are not listening to them, because they have so much ga'ava. Ga'ava is more than pride. There's a good kind of pride. There's a very good type of pride. And there's nothing wrong with pride per se, but ga'ava means a negative type of pride. And that leads to anger. That when a person doesn't get their way and doesn't know how to compromise and is full of ego, so inevitably it leads to ka'as, which leads to anger. Now, I want to go back to a minute of the exercise we did with the 4-letter name of God, where we multiplied the 4 letters, Yud times Yud, Hey times Hey, Vav times Vav, and Hey times Hey, we got 186 equals Makom. But there's another way to get to Makom, which is very, very important, is it's 31 times 6. 31 times 6 equals 186. What's the significance of 31? It's the name of God, Kel, Aleph, Lamed. This name of God, which is a very important name, because it's not only just the 2 letters as the name of God, but it's the first 2 letters of the name Elohim, is Aleph, Lamed. But by itself, it equals 31. So what's the significance of multiplying it times 6? And that is that a cube is 6-sided. And space is basically an expanding cube. All of space, no matter where you're going to put the central point, wherever the perspective is, one will have the 4 cardinal directions and above and below. This is the whole exercise of shaking lulav. We shake to the 6 directions, and we're in the middle. We're the middle point. So we're creating around us what Rav Ginsburg called is living in divine space. But again, we said space is makom. And so when you multiply 31 times 6, this is, I think it was called Uncle Moishi. Hashem is here, Hashem is there, Hashem is everywhere, up, down, all around. However, that's how I went, I can't remember. But this is the idea that you have the name of God in all 6 directions of makom. And actually they say that one of the intentions, one of the kavanot when shaking lulav is simply just to be aware of God's presence all around us. In fact, that's the whole idea of sitting in a sukkah. A sukkah is also a cube. And we're sitting, it's a 6-sided space. And we're sitting in the sukkah, and especially the schach, the upper roof, is reminding us of how God's presence, the Shekhinah, sometimes it's called the wings of the Shekhinah, are hovering over us during Sukkot. So since we mentioned multiplying times 6, is up to now, almost every time we've been multiplying by 10. But that's not the only way to do these multiplications. So here we just did 1 by 6, and now we'll do another 1 by 6. And this is connecting all the way back to the first thing we said tonight, For those who weren't here right at the beginning, we learned that the second and third word of the Torah that God created in the beginning, then it says bara Elokim. Bara Elokim equals 289 equals 17 squared. 17 equals good, goodness. So we see goodness stamped in the creation from the very beginning. An essential part of every creation is a revelation of God's goodness. So here, good equals 17. What happens when you multiply it times 6? Equals 102, equals emunah, equals faith. So what's the significance? Again, this idea of a cube, without going into it, but this is one of the main Jewish meditations, is this idea of being in the middle of divine space. Because remember, we call God makom. So this idea of multiplying times 6, it implies this idea of a surrounding energy. And that's what faith is. Faith is when we feel that no matter what's happening, good, not so good, at least we don't experience it initially as good. That's why Nachum Ish Gamzu said, Gamzu Latova. Even this, meaning even this, which right now I'm experiencing as some kind of a negative energy, even this is for the good. But that implies this feeling of like the sukkah, being surrounded with our faith, that we feel that God's presence is all around us. So 17 times 6 equals 102. In other words, goodness in every direction equals faith. Now, what happens when you multiply faith times 6 equals 612 equals Brit, the covenant that we have with God. And this is also the same idea of a surrounding energy, that when we believe in God, we have faith in God, and we have faith in the Torah, and we make our lifestyle a lifestyle of trying to fulfill the mitzvot of the Torah. That is how we integrate the idea that we have a covenant with God. In other words, every Jew has a covenant with God, whether one does the mitzvot or not. But there's a huge difference of feeling having a covenant and not feeling having a covenant. So faith times 6, meaning when our faith is totally surrounding us, then we have this faith in our covenant with God. We have a faith that the words of the Torah are a manifestation of the will of God. So this is a good place to stop. And we'll end with a bracha, like we always try to do, is we should always feel God's goodness. We should always surround ourselves with faith in God, and also faith in ourselves. And that faith should create a true feeling of having a real covenant with God.